Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Founders on Fire podcast. I'm Rose Ross. I'm the Chief Trailblazer and founder of the awards, and I'm delighted to be joined today by John Morello, who's CTO and co-founder of Minimus, who were our containers or are our containers winners from last year. Hello, John.
Hey, thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. So, first off, John, tell us a little bit about Minimus. What do you guys do? What are you doing in the container space? Because I think you're doing a lot of very interesting stuff.
Yeah, it's actually a very easy thing to understand. One of the, we've been involved in the container ecosystem now for well over a decade. We started our previous company, Twistlock, back in 2015, and ultimately sold that to Palo Alto Networks and became Prisma Cloud and so forth. But basically, the problems that existed around container security in 2015. One of the most foundational ones was the fact that the images that people use, that those images often have many vulnerabilities associated with them.
Mhm.
And because of that, like it's up to the user to basically try to figure out what to do to remediate those vulnerabilities. And if that's fine, if you're talking about like a few containers running a few different images, but most organizations may have many, many containers and many, many, many different images, and it becomes something that becomes almost impossible for them to be able to manage. And one of the reasons why that's impossible is even the official images from big projects like Python or Nginx or typically include lots of components that may not be required to run Python. They're there for the convenience of the builder of the image. And those images are not updated when all those other things change. They're only updated when the main component, Python or Nginx or something, has a new version. And what that results in for customers is images that have many vulnerabilities, that have a very large attack surface because they have a lot of stuff in them, and then ultimately, like, it's very difficult for most organizations to do anything about that. And so what we're doing at Minimus is we are building thousands of different images where every single component in that image is being built directly from upstream source. And we're including only those components that are really required to run the application in that image. And we're building those images every time anything in them changes. And so the net result of that is if you look at Python, for example, if your developers are trying to do the right thing and pulling the very latest version of the official Python image today, this morning,
Yeah.
they're going to get something with like 400 some odd vulnerabilities, like more than 100 of which are high and critical. The Minimus version of the exact same Python software, because we're building it from the same upstream source, has no vulnerabilities, is about a tenth the size on disk. And because we're updating everything in it continuously, it will stay at that zero CVE baseline over time. And so really the value for you as a customer is all this effort that you have to do to scan and triage and fix and test and deploy updates for commodity open source software that you rely on to build your apps and run your infrastructure. You can effectively just outsource that responsibility entirely to us,
Mm.
utilize the images that we provide, and immediately reduce your vulnerabilities and your attack surface by 98, 99% relative to where you're at today. So it's
Mm.
it's a huge benefit from a security standpoint, and a huge benefit from just a developer efficiency standpoint as well.
Mm. Interesting. Interesting. So you mentioned obviously you touched upon your past with Twistlock. So yeah, so you've been in and out of in the container space for a long time, and you co-founded Twistlock with your co-founders here of Minimus as well. So you're a returning founding group, or
It's the same CEO, Ben, and VP of R&D, Dima, that we had at Twistlock, yes.
fantastic. So that must have been quite an easy transition from moving from Twistlock into founding Minimus because you've all worked closely together
Well,
before.
we all know each other, but I mean, I don't think any of this stuff is very easy, unfortunately. I mean, if it was easy, everybody would do it. I mean,
No, I wasn't talking about the
it's,
technology. I was talking more about the management team that
oh
you're
yeah, in terms of
having.
knowing each other, of course. Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Do you think that
absolutely.
made a
Like having,
difference in the overall scheme of things as you were building Minimus up?
well, I mean, I think anytime that you've got, very long-term, deep relationships with people, it makes it, it just always makes it easier to work together, and that, it even predates, Twistlock, like Ben specifically, I've known since for over 20 years now, since we were working at Microsoft together for a long time as well. So,
Mm,
those kinds of relationships and, the knowledge of how people work and their strengths and even their weaknesses for that matter,
mm,
it just makes it a lot easier to know what they're gonna do. We can and do regularly go to meetings with customers or partners or whomever, and, like, we don't have to plan out who's gonna say what or what we're gonna do or anything like that. Like, we just, when you've done it for that long, you kinda know how everybody works together and you can fit together pretty easily.
right. Definitely, you have already your flow as a unit.
Exactly.
Fantastic. So, is there anything you can tell us about what's coming up? What's been happening in the last sort of 6 to 12 months, and what's coming? Big show next
Well, I
week.
think the
Anything
biggest thing for
exciting you can share with us about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing for us recently and is clearly the community edition that we just released a few weeks
Mm.
ago. So Minimus Community Edition is a library of all of our images, literally thousands of images, including images that have FIPS compliant cryptography, images that are pre-hardened for CIS and FedRAMP and other requirements that people have for compliance. All those images
Hmm.
freely available for anyone to use without a sign up, without an authentication wall, without any friction at all.
Mm.
What we really are trying to do is to make it as easy as possible for as many people as possible to get all these benefits from secure hardened container images without having to deal with a sales team or even necessarily have a budget. Now, if you say, well, like, what's the business there? Well, obviously, like what we've seen, and I think the whole open source world has shown for decades now, organizations are willing to pay for support and service level agreements and
Mm.
enterprise integration features, and all that stuff is still something that's uniquely available in our enterprise edition. So,
Hmm.
for example, if you want to be able to create custom images either via the browser or via our command line tool and have us maintain those images for you over time as we do any of the other ones, that's an enterprise edition feature. If you want, our industry leading 24-hour SLA for fixing vulnerabilities and have that contractually backed, that's an enterprise edition feature. So there's still a lot of things that people rely upon for their operations and to make it as easy to use and safe for them to use as possible. That's in our enterprise product. But the images critically are the same. It's the exact same thing. We're not, giving you images that have less functionality or, somehow hindered or crippled or something like that. It is
Mm.
literally the same images and they're just available for everybody. One of the other things that we really spent a lot of effort on with this is to make sure that those images are as easily discoverable and as easy to work with by agents as possible. So, it's just a standard OCI compliant image, of course, so any agent could conceivably work with it. But if you do some additional work to make it easier for agents to discover those images,
Mm.
understand their behavior, like, what is the UID and GID mapping and volume mount points and things of that nature. If you expose all that through a very straightforward, consistent machine interface, then it becomes a lot easier for agents to find those things and to use them. And in fact, one of the more popular parts of the product that we have is the agent integration, in which we provide for community edition users a very, very detailed, like something like 15 pages worth of text prompt that instructs that agent in just like a simple copy and paste all the information it needs to know to help automatically migrate an existing Docker file or Kubernetes configuration to utilize Minimus images. And then with an enterprise edition, the same kind of functionality, but to make it available also to set up at the repo level. So any software agent that's working within a given repo can find that and use that. And then
Mm,
also to even configure an entire developer workstation globally for no matter what software it's using to be able to prefer and to find and to use these images. And the benefit of that is like, as you can imagine, almost nobody is a green field. They've got, probably hundreds, maybe even thousands of different images and Docker files and so forth that they've created over the years. This allows you to basically tell your agent, look, we've got all this stuff that we've built using the kind of the historical Docker Hub images that exist out there. What
mm,
what can I do to ease the migration to using these hardened images and remove all these vulnerabilities? Well, what we've seen is that, literally 95% plus time, that's nothing that the user ends up having to do manually at all. The agent can do that entire configuration and changeover for them. And so, it really takes all the friction out of getting the benefits from this system because you can just simply tell the agent with this very detailed prompt and all the, kind of the interfaces that we built to make it easy to find that stuff, tell the agent to do that work for you.
great. Sounds like you've been busy. Sounds like
Yes.
you've been busy. So is there anything coming down the pipe that we can talk about, or is it all still on the QT?
Well, I mean, we're always working on new functionality and new stuff in the product, and obviously always building images. We have thousands of images now, but we're building new images like literally, tens of them almost every day based on, what we see that's used out there and things that customers request and just, our own intuition and so forth. Within the product, one of the key things that we're working is to expand our supply chain protection functionality. So
Right, great.
our the think about with everything with software, of course, is about layers ultimately. And for if you think about things like Node and Python, getting a secure image to start with is a great starting point, but it's not everything, right? Like, because you're not going to take a Python image and just run Python as an executable. You're going to run Python code on top of that, right? And so what we want to do is to make it as easy as possible for people to take that foundational image and
Mm,
then to be able to install via npm or pip or other package managers whatever other components they need on top of that safe foundation. But one of the problems, as you probably know with this is,
mm,
in recent years, there's been a lot of these supply chain poisoning attacks where,
sure.
malicious actors would go and identify,
Mm,
opportunities to create like a project that was malicious but had a name that looked very similar to a well-known project. Or maybe they would even go as far as committing something to a project. Maybe it was only a solo developer that ever maintained that, and they make a commit that seems innocuous or even beneficial, but actually includes some kind of backdoor that's not easy to see.
mm,
And so one of the things that we've done is we provided these guardrails, what we call supply chain protection, in which we basically run proxies on our customers' behalf where they can route all those pulls for those package installations through us, and we can apply guardrails, for example, to say, require some kind of cooling off period. So when something is changed upstream, you want it to have to be out there for a week or a month for the community to assess that it's been safe and it does what it's supposed to. We can filter out typo squatting attacks or, unusual commitments. If it's always been Alice that's contributed to this project and suddenly Bob, who never has, commits to it, maybe you want to wait a little bit longer before you use that to make sure it's safe. So those are some of the controls we have in place, and we're adding to that now to also augment that with additional capabilities and intelligence there to make it even easier for people to filter out risky packages that they install.
mm. Fantastic, fantastic. So, had one question when you talked about this discoverability by agents. Have you got any statistics about what percentage you were seeing of interaction with agents? I don't know if that's possible for you to tell whether it's an
It's
agent.
not Yeah, it's not really directly straightforward to tell because
Mm,
remember an agent is just, kind of acting on behalf of a user. So an
sure,
agent, when they are pulling an image from us, they're calling the Docker executable the same way, on whatever system
sure.
it's running on, the same way that a human would. So there's some heuristics and there's some ways that you can try to ascertain that. But,
Mm,
ultimately, one of the things that's great about this, and I think it's made agentic development, so accelerate so much recently is,
hmm,
ultimately it's able just to stand on the shoulders of the same tools that have existed for a long time. Like you didn't have to develop something special for
sure.
an agent to work with images. It's calling Docker, Podman, or whatever, kubectl. And it effectively to us looks the same. Like I said, there are some things that we can use to try to make some guesses and so forth. But in general, it's really just the same kind of interactions that we would have because it's the same standard protocols, the same standard image formats. We really didn't have to do anything special or proprietary there at all.
Right. Fantastic. So tell us a little bit about what recognition like the Tech Trailblazers means to you and the team at Minimus.
Well, I mean, I think for us, it's always, very meaningful whenever anybody recognizes the work that we put into this. We've been working on this for a long time and working in this space for a long time, and so, when people recognize that the work is beneficial and something that's useful for the kind of the world at large, I guess, and it always helps validate that and helps validate the time and effort that the whole team has put into it.
Fantastic. Is there anything else you'd like to share with us with regards to what you're doing or just general thoughts around the industry?
Well, I think we've gone through, like, what we do, pretty well and given a good overview there. I guess the thing I would do is or thing I would encourage everybody is, if you use containers at all, you almost certainly have this problem. Minimus Community Edition is a free way that you can address that, and ultimately, if you want more capabilities and more, contractual guarantees, it's, like, simply a matter of updating to Enterprise Edition and use exactly the same images. So anybody can use those for free at images.minimus.io, and I encourage any of your viewers to do so.
Fantastic. Well, one last thing. When you were describing right at the beginning around obviously the hardened images are, obviously reducing the exposure.
Yeah,
Um Obviously, everybody in security has had a bit of a wake-up call with the whole Mythos and Glasswing project
yeah.
stuff that Anthropic had done. Have you seen any have you got any big takeaways from those types of developments for yourselves?
Well, there's a lot of interest, a lot of visibility into that, but I think that it really just re-emphasizes the importance of being able to rapidly consume vulnerability fixes from all the upstream open source that you use. And that's effectively what we're doing. I mean, like,
Mm,
what the whole value that we provide is getting fixes from the upstream to the user in a ready to run, tested, validated artifact as rapidly as possible. I mean, like, you could theoretically, do all of the things that we're doing in the sense of, like, monitor projects and build from source and, assemble them into images
sure.
and test them and so forth. Like, it's all open source stuff. We completely acknowledge that. But there's always value, I think, in saying, look, like, while I could do this, it's very expensive and hard and difficult for me to do that reliably. Whereas there's a company that's really built a whole pipeline around doing that consistently at scale, and I could just simply use what they're providing and be able to get the same benefits, but much more efficiently for my organization. And so, like, our whole value prop of saying, like, we're getting you that software as fast as possible when there are updates. And also that what you're getting from us is as minimal as possible so that the time between when you need to get those updates is as long as possible because there's less stuff in there. There's less things that are impacted by vulnerabilities. And thus the time frame, that mean time between
Mm,
updates is longer. That helps you in a really direct way. You have less security risk to start with. You have less work that you have to do to maintain it in that way. And over time, that work will continue to stay low because we are ensuring that that image only includes the functionality that's required there. And, really, I think things like Mythos and Glasswing and everything else, all it really does is reemphasize a problem that frankly, most organizations have already struggled with even before the age of offensive
sure.
AI-driven security research. Most organizations still struggle just to consume upstream updates for critical vulnerabilities to begin with. This just makes that problem that much more urgent.
I hear you. I hear you. Well, on that note, I'll wish you a wonderful time at the show next week. You'll be heading off to Black Hat with the rest of the team and many, many, many other people who are thinking about cybersecurity every
Absolutely.
day, 24 hours of the day. But hopefully, catch up with some exciting people, share what you're doing with a lot of people along the way. So, thank you, John. And thank you to our listeners and our viewers. Very much appreciate you taking the time to check in with us here at the Founders on Fire podcast. And thanks again, John, for taking the time to be with us.
Sure. Thanks for having us.
You're very welcome.